for 10 seconds while you do your intro. It's not going to bother
All
me.
right. Yeah, so here we got Adam Kokesh, and he's seeking the Libertarian nomination for president. And Mr. Kokesh, first question is, why are you running for president?
I'm running for president in order to dissolve the federal government of the United States in a peaceful, orderly, responsible manner, leaving us with 50 independent states, 5 autonomous territories, and up to 562 sovereign native nations.
Okay. Now, how do you expect to do this? Let's say you get elected. Do you have, for instance, a constitutional amendment that the states would be passing that would then amend the Constitution to dissolve itself? Or how would you do that?
You know, it's funny to hear so many libertarians ask the question like, would you have the authority to do this? Would the crown be okay with your revolution, sir? Is it constitutional to dissolve the federal government with an executive order? And my answer is no. Of course, it's not constitutional. That's kind of the point. And many presidents, in fact, pretty much all of the ones we've had recently, have done plenty of things outside of the bounds of the Constitution, but have gotten away with it because they have had the at least tacit consent of the American people. And we are invoking the higher authority known as the Declaration of Independence, which says we have not only a right, but a duty to alter and abolish systems of government that no longer serve us. Now, it's very important to point out that I'm really not running for president in order to be president, because the first thing I'm going to do is resign. The executive order that I will sign will declare the federal government of no authority in order to put it into a bankruptcy proceeding. So I would essentially be serving as a bankruptcy agent, and my title will be custodian of the federal government of the United States. So what I am doing with this campaign, what we are doing with this election, is turning it into a referendum on whether or not the federal government should be allowed to exist at all. And when the American people make their voice clear, decisively, irrefutably, through the election process, that we are not going to put up with the existence of the federal government any longer, no jerk in a suit in Washington, D.C., no congressman, no senator, no Supreme Court justice even, not even this jerk, could possibly stand in our way. So what I've told people is that even if you don't think you can trust me, it ultimately doesn't matter, because this election is based on a paradigm shift about the nature of government, that it should be as local as possible, that we should get it down ultimately to the community level in an orderly process, one step at a time. First, dissolve the federal government, get to a point of stability, dissolve the state governments, get them down to the counties. And at that point, we're pretty much done. Counties being imperfect approximations of communities, at least at that point, you can see people break off in their own areas. You can see people separate and declare independence on their own property. And you can turn government into a voluntary institution or completely replace it with non-coercive means of social organization.
Would you be then for abolishing all federal laws pertaining to age of consent?
Well, essentially, by declaring the federal government of no authority, none of its laws are going to be enforced or enforceable at all. So yes, of course, all age of consent laws at the federal government would no longer be enforced.
Okay, and I bring this up because there's criticism that libertarians sometimes receive that somehow being in favor of abolishing laws about something equals supporting it.
Right. Well, it's
how do you address that?
Yeah, excuse me. Well, Scotty, by the way, I got to say, for the work that you do here, and I got the honor of hearing your presentation just a few minutes ago upstairs about the newsletter with the Libertarian Party of Michigan. You know, there are a lot of people doing great work and making a very careful effort to represent the Libertarian Party honestly, publicly. And it's a real shame that we have this kind of misrepresentation by the mainstream media, by the opponents in the old parties, those who would attack and misrepresent our positions. So first of all, when you pose that question like that, we have to understand what a law is. Now, we're not talking about the natural law. We're not talking about laws of science or physics or astronomy or anything like that. No, we're talking about words written on paper by human beings that they use as an excuse to point guns at people who don't follow their edicts. That's not an ethical premise. That kind of law shouldn't exist. The only law that we should have is the natural law, which is the idea that every human being has the right to self-ownership, to own themselves. So when we say that we shouldn't have a law doing something, it means that we should have peaceful, voluntary, cooperative means of addressing these issues. And specifically, when it comes to age of consent, this is one that is very often twisted and misrepresented. Obviously, a libertarian message that's based on our principles is one that asserts the universality of human rights, regardless of age discrimination. So you are a human being with unalienable rights, regardless of your age.
Okay. Now I also wanted to bring this over to another topic, which earlier you've been talking about the corruption in the Libertarian Party. And that was one thing I didn't put in the newsletter specifically because that was like our policy was not to get into those matters.
And I loved what you said about that, Scotty. It's absolutely important that we keep the factionalism within the party in the appropriate forms and not in part of what we put forth to the public through a state party website. So I totally support your policy there.
Okay, and so I am going to go with it now. And
this being a different forum.
Right. And also I know it's something that your campaign has specifically wanted to get out to people. So I feel that's fair, but I also feel I should ask some questions about it. Please. And I wanted clarification on, first of all, what happened in Arizona with, now, describe to me, all right, let me ask specifically. Was it you acting along with the delegates of Arizona had presented the list to members of the National Party? Explain exactly how that went.
Well, with a group of friends, not officially affiliated in any particular way, people who are new to the party, people who we want to encourage to be more involved in the party, we wanted to make sure that we were paying attention to what the delegate selection process was going to be. And I made the commitment through my campaign, as I still do, to help anybody who wants to be involved in the party, who stands by the statement of principles, to be a delegate to the National Convention, to help deal with some of these issues and the corruption in the party, and to make sure that we remain the party of principle. So we were sitting together at the Arizona State Convention, and in order to make things simple, we wanted to make sure that we had all of our information correct. So we used note cards, we had name, qualification, and the information that was necessary under the Arizona State Libertarian Party bylaws to submit ourselves as delegates to the National Convention to represent the state of Arizona. And because it was on a first come, first served basis, we wanted to make sure that we were first. So we had all 14 of us put our note cards together. And we had Liam Fisher, who's 9 years old, who may be the youngest delegate to the Libertarian National Convention ever, submit them to the newly elected chair of the party, Howard Blitz. And we found out only later, when only some of us received emails and some didn't, that a number had been disqualified. And when we asked why... Okay,
I'm sorry, I'm going to just interrupt because I want to make sure I got this on a step-by-step thing. So initially, you did do, the list had been produced internally within the state party to be submitted by the state chair to the national organization that included the people that you're mentioning.
That is not correct. And that was one of the problems. That the next thing we found out in speaking with Jeff Daniels, the secretary of the party, is that the executive committee had decided to not publish a list and to do their delegate review in secret. And that was a major problem because it meant that people who had submitted their information correctly did not have a chance to contest their disqualification.
Okay, now who did they submit it to originally?
To the state chair, newly elected at this year's convention, Howard Blitz.
Okay, because I wanted to be clear that it was, but you did submit the information. And when I said through the party, I meant like, was it at a convention?
At the state convention this year, yes. That was when the 14 cards were submitted together.
And that was the procedure that was laid out in the party bylaws.
They said first come, first serve. Well, not necessarily in the party bylaws, but by vote at that convention. And that was why we were very careful to be present and be clear on exactly what the requirements were and what the process was going to be. And it was simply first come, first serve. These are the qualifications. So give us your name, give us the qualifications, and that's what we did. And we did it independently. Each person was on their own note card with their own information, but we made sure that they were all submitted together so that they would be there before anybody else. There was only one other person, and that was Ernest Hancock of Freedom's Phoenix. That's Freedoms with an S, no apostrophe, freedomsphoenix.com out of Phoenix, Arizona. And aside from him, we were the next 14 on the list. So out of the 23 potential delegates representing the state of Arizona, we knew that those slots should have been secured for those 14.
Okay, and so then what happened? So just to pick back up.
So then I got an email. I happened to be the chair of Yavapai County Libertarian Party in Arizona, organized just last year. And they said that I was approved as a delegate. And then we looked around and asked some of our friends who had also submitted cards the same way, we believe all of them were qualified. We've made sure that they were all at least members of the National Party, which is the one of the qualifications. And if you meet that, there are no other requirements for you to be representative of Arizona at the National Convention. And nobody else had got an email, or I believe it was only one or two others out of those 14 who had got an email. So they had summarily disqualified in secret the majority of the people who had submitted their requests to be delegates to the National Convention, and not giving them any chance to contest their disqualifications.
Okay, and so then how did you follow up? You contact the National Party?
No, we engaged in a somewhat lengthy email back and forth with the party secretary, Jeff Daniels, and made it clear what had happened, and then decided to consider legal action, because in Arizona, it's rather unfortunate that the state of Arizona requires each independent party to jump through a lot of hoops. I mean, very typical stuff. I mean, you experience the same thing here in Michigan, where the old parties will do whatever they can to keep new parties, like the LP, off the ballot, and make it as difficult as possible for us to organize. Of course, you have the signature collecting requirement, which is the typical way that they keep Libertarian candidates off the ballot here, that is really onerous and unfair. But in Arizona, you have to be a legally recognized body. And so the Arizona State Party had actually violated state law by violating their own bylaws in this process. And so we were considering legal action. And we looked into each person individually who had been disqualified. So not myself, but that the individuals who had not been given the chance to actually contest their disqualification, give them the chance to do that with the party. And what we've done instead is encourage them all to send emails, and we've helped them in that by gathering the emails of all the members of the state executive committee, including myself. As a county chair, I am automatically a member of the state central committee, which is the government recognized legal body that is the Arizona State LP. And to say simply, hey, we did not, we would like the opportunity to contest our disqualification. Here's what happened. Here's the proof. We had a video of the 14 cards being submitted as the very second, if not very first, obviously, right behind Ernest Hancock there, batch of requests that went in. And I specifically went up to Howard Blitz after the meeting to shake his hand and say congratulations on being the new state chair, and to ask him as a gentleman if he would honor this in good faith. And I cannot pass judgment on him in particular, as this was done by a vote of the executive committee, which includes a number of people other than himself, some of whom have been openly hostile to our campaign. But what's really sad is that, and you're aware of this, Scotty, you've seen this in LP Michigan as well, and probably throughout the party and all of your years of activism, that despite being the party of principle, we have been infiltrated by a number of petty tyrants who, rather than make the party more inclusive and inviting and welcoming, would like to defend their little fiefdoms. And it seems that that's a big part of what's happening in LP Arizona. And what's really sad is that the factionalism is being used or is a motivation for a lot of these people to keep the party small, instead of being more inclusive and welcoming and saying, we want this kind of libertarian, that kind of libertarian, anybody who embraces our statement of principles. We want to keep people out who disagree with us. It's as if they'd rather be in charge of a useless party than be a part of the team of a winning party that can be a coalition that can unite people. And if I may turn it back to the message of my campaign, as we see within the party factionalism, a lot of people can't agree on strategy, tactics, and the definition of libertarian, but the statement of principles of the party is very clear and very uniting, because it speaks to our common humanity, that which seeks freedom in all of us. And so instead of trying to debate what should we do with the federal government, what should we do with this government office, the message of my campaign is that government should be localized as much as possible, down to the community level and ultimately to the individual. And this is something that has the power to bring more people into the party, as we have seen. This is something that has the power to unite left, right, and center against the common enemy that is big centralized government. And if we want the Libertarian Party to go from being a debate club to being a political force, we have to get past all this petty divisiveness and figure out a way to be more inclusive and more welcoming.
I just realized, I think we're going to pause this interview for a moment.
But you want to take a step to your left to get the same frame. There you go.
Okay. Yeah. So I just want to clarify. So did this ever get to the National Party? Because I thought I remember reading something about a adverse reaction at the national level regarding your delegates, about the Arizona delegates.
I'm not aware of any involvement of the National Party in this issue with the Arizona LP. There may be, but I have not been informed of any.
Oh. Okay.
So far, it's all stayed at the state level.
Okay, because did somebody at some point laugh at your delegate list? Was there an experience where that happened where when at some point you brought up the issue that someone laughed it off or something?
Yes, but that was at the state level.
That was the state chair.
No, it was someone involved with the state party, and I don't believe that person has any official capacity with the state.
Is Nicholas Sarwalk from Arizona?
Now, Nick Sarwark is from Arizona, and he is a member of the Arizona State LP. And as the national chair, he was not acting in his capacity as the national chair while at the Arizona State Libertarian Party convention. But he did object to the submission of cards, as we had done at the campaign at the convention, and was laughed down. When Liam submitted the stack of cards to Howard Blitz, Nick Sarwark raised his hand and stood up and said, point of order, I believe that the slate of cards for delegates that was just submitted is out of order. And Ernie Hancock was there and said, show him the book, and picked up his book of Robert's Rules of Orders and was kind of making fun of him for that, and he was generally laughed down. And there was also a resolution to condemn pedophilia at the state convention, which I thought was wonderfully worded and very clear and concise. Not to make any bigger deal out of it than it needed to be, but Nick stood up and spoke out against the resolution to condemn pedophilia as well. So while you could say that was an involvement of a National Party officer, certainly not the National Party, as he was not acting in his capacity as national chairman.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, because I had thought that it was all national when I'd read the press release. Okay, now moving on to another topic. We have our, how is your dog Baloo doing?
Well, you can meet him. We should get him on video.
He is here.
He's way more fun to do interviews with than me. He's a better listener.
I'm happy to do that in just a minute. Let me see.
Yes,
I'd love to do that.
I have to point out that my dog Blue, he's a Great Dane mix, purebred shelter dog, and he's survived some pretty serious police encounters with me. When my home was raided in 2013, he had a flashbang grenade thrown at him, and it went off right under his butt. It actually saved his life because it was a Parks Police SWAT team. Now remember, this is United States Park Police, federal law enforcement, FBI Academy dropouts. These are the dregs of the federal law enforcement barrel, and they were using me as an excuse to justify a lot of their budget with 2 helicopters over my house, an armored vehicle, and a full SWAT team raid. So they knocked down the door, they threw in a flashbang grenade as Baloo was walking towards the door, and because it went off right under his butt, it scared him so bad. Now, I'm at the top of the stairs in front of the front door, the foyer in my house, and you know what happens when police raid homes and there's a dog there? The dog gets shot. And in this case, the flashbang grenade actually saved his life because he was so scared that he ended up running up the stairs towards me. And by the time he got halfway up the stairs, I'm standing there like this with 3 green laser sights pointed at my chest going, Baloo, bed, 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 as in go to your crate and go to your bed and don't get shot. And he did, and that's what saved his life. But in my recent arrest in Texas, because I was driving No Force 1, and he was the only other person in the vehicle with me. And as smart as he is, he's not a very good driver, and the police weren't comfortable with him driving the vehicle away. He was taken away to doggy jail and had to be bailed out the next day by one of our supporters in Texas. But he has now got more police interaction under his belt than I think most Libertarian Party activists, and I got to hand it to him. He has always handled it with grace and diplomacy, and is loving and affectionate of every human being he comes in encounter with, even those wielding guns. He's really just a pure love puppy, and it's one of the amazing things about dogs, the more love you put in, the more you get out. And he's been on a few national tours with me at this point, and everywhere he goes, he's a great ambassador for freedom.
Okay, now
I should say one more thing about Baloo.
Oh yeah.
When we got arrested in Texas recently, there were 10 times as many inquiries about his safety and well-being than about mine, and very appropriately so.
But I was interested specifically when that was going on. I mean, I was one of those inquiries, though I think I was asking about you too. But the first thing I heard was, that somebody had come and bailed him out. But how long was it when you were in jail before you knew about Blue being bailed out?
Oh, I knew right away. One of the things
Okay.
about Wise County and the general racket there in the county jail is that they charge you $1 per minute on the phone. So they encourage you to use it as much as you want. And I definitely made good use of the phone, even though I was in solitary the whole time and had to reach out of the metal slot in the door very awkwardly and contort my body in some very uncomfortable ways. I had I had to wait for the phone a number of times. It was unavailable, but by and large, I had unlimited access to the phone. At least I didn't want to spend any more money than necessary, but I was able to use the phone every day while I was there.
As of today, have you seen the charges regarding all that in Texas?
Not formally, no. And it's one of the really disgusting things about how they handle criminal justice or criminal injustice, really, in the state of Texas. And this was an arrest by Texas state troopers. And so in 10 days when I was in jail, I did not, and every single day, I demanded that I get all of the paperwork to which I was entitled, and I did not receive a single formal document from the government regarding any of the charges.
As far as you know, do you have a trial date set at any time?
Can't have a trial date without charges, so we're still waiting on that.
Okay. Did they confiscate anything from you that you have not had returned to you?
At least a number of things that I know were missing from my vehicle, none of which were contraband, which is really sad. But beyond that, I'm not really in a good legal position right now to discuss any of the other physical circumstances of the arrest. But yes, a number of things were stolen from me during the arrest. And if you saw the video that we released afterwards, it looked like my RV, which is my home, was ransacked. And what at very least they did was open up all the cabinets and leave them open while the vehicle was towed away. And it really is disgusting what they did. And this was, remember, within an hour of me announcing my candidacy for president on the platform of dissolving the federal government. I was pulled over twice, and on the second time, it was very clear that the arresting officer wanted me to leave in handcuffs. There were so many procedural violations, Fourth Amendment violations. They pulled out a drug dog, and they had the dog hit on the vehicle while Blue was on the inside whining to get out. So clearly not a legitimate search, plenty of Fourth Amendment violations, and I have no doubt that if we decide to pursue the legal strategy of having the evidence suppressed simply on those grounds, that whatever they want to hold against me, be it something that was there or something that was planted, it will not hold up in court. But I really do hope that this one goes to trial. As I was telling you earlier, I've defended myself in court a number of times, but never in a trial, only in smaller hearings leading up to trial or negotiations or in dealing with probation. And no one represents you like yourself. So I hope that this one goes to trial. We're going to have a lot of fun with it. We're going to embarrass the heck out of all of these criminals who work for the state of Texas. We're going to do everything we can to sue the county of Weiss, including the sheriff, Sheriff Aiken. And there were so many civil rights violations as well in the course of this arrest. One of the things that was really encouraging for me in all of this is that when I got out, I received about a dozen messages from people in Weiss County who have similarly been drug war victims. And they are really disgusted at what they are doing in that county and the collaboration between Texas State Troopers and Weiss County. So we are meeting them probably April 1st or 2nd. I'm going to be back in the Dallas area to have some events with some of the local victims of the drug war. And I have a lot of opportunities for lawsuits coming out of this. So I am going to sue for everything I possibly can, both the state of Texas and Weiss County and the arresting officers and Weiss County Sheriff Aiken. And I will not take a single penny of anything that I receive from any of those lawsuits for myself or for any of my political causes or organizations. Instead, they will all go to pay restitution for the other victims of the drug war in Weiss County. So I'm very much looking forward to achieving an important piece of justice for the true victims and those who are really made destitute by the war on drugs. And that's what's really sad about this. I think when we talk about this, even within the Libertarian Party, we talk about the drug war being criminal, unconstitutional, unjustified, violation of individual rights, because you, as an individual human being, have the absolute right to decide what you put in your own body, and it is criminal for anybody to interfere with that right. But what we often forget is that victims of the drug war are not the rich and famous and powerful in society. They are often the downtrodden. They are the victims of the system in general. And for many of them, having a drug charge means the difference between getting a job or not. It means the difference between poverty or economic comfort. It means the difference between being able to live a normal, satisfactory life or being a continuous victim of the system. Dealing with going to court, having to miss work for things like that, getting arrested, having to do a few days in jail even, can really ruin someone's life, especially when they're on the edge of poverty. And the drug war certainly promotes poverty by making life unnecessarily difficult for a lot of Americans and serving the interests of those corrupt profiteers of the war on drugs.
Okay, now back to the and I don't know if you can answer this. I'm going to put it a different way. Is there a list of items that the
Have they released an evidence list?
Yes.
No.
Oh.
It is still secret as far as I'm concerned. As far as
Interesting.
I know.
Interesting. Okay. Now back also to the federal issues, and I am gonna cut it off pretty soon. I know you've been here a while with me.
Scotty,
And I do want to talk to
time
Baloo.
and especially for someone who puts so much time and effort into building the party and your own activism. I'm only on a handful of email lists, but I do see yours, and I do at least read the subjects every time. So it is good to know that you are here carrying the torch in Michigan.
Okay, yeah. What I was going to ask about is, and again, because on the policy issue, issues of your campaign, dissolving the federal government. Talk to me about what happens with the military. Now, I'm not so much concerned. I think most people understand clearly. Even a minarchist getting elected would pull our troops out from foreign entanglements and all that. But as far as the domestic defense, the defense structure protecting the homeland here, how will that be affected, and how will that change? What will happen to all those weapons, for one thing?
Well, I have a very perfect, concise answer to your question, but since you raised the issue of even a minarchist, I have to address that first because I think there's a very dangerous artificial divide in the movement. The word anarchist has been very maligned, and if the word is taken for its literal meaning, no rulers, I have not heard a single definition of libertarian that includes people should have rulers. Therefore, they're synonymous. Everybody who's a libertarian is also an anarchist. Now, how you apply that, how you interpret that, may be cause for certain divisions and different ideas of how we approach the problem of government. But what I'm suggesting is not either one, but rather localization. And this is something that unites liberals and conservatives and moderates even against the common enemy of big central government. So this divide, these labels are really silly, false divides. The statement of principles of the Libertarian Party is very clear that government, if it exists at all, must be voluntary. And so if the term anarchist means that we should have no government at all, then you have to define government, because we have corporate government, we have community government, we have organizational government, and all those things are clearly voluntary, and they wouldn't fit the definition of government that I generally use as a coercive institution. So in localizing government, the objective is to make it voluntary by getting it down to the community level, not to overthrow it, not to abolish the entire thing, but to get it down to that level in a peaceful, orderly, responsible manner. So how I apply those principles to the military is at first, we bring all the troops home from abroad. No problem there, right? All of the military equipment and weaponry that can be brought home from abroad comes with them. What we leave on each foreign military installation or property is a skeleton crew, the bare minimum necessary for carrying out a sale of that property. All of those properties will be liquidated, and those funds will go into the general fund of the bankruptcy of the federal government in order to fund the VA, spun off as a private institution, and to fund Social Security as a private charity that will be solvent now for decades, allowing plenty of time for states and individuals in the free market to solve the question of retirement in far better, more effective ways. If we have tons of money, and who knows how much we're going to have, because the federal government has been stealing from people for a long time, and it's really impossible to do the math this far in advance, we might have money to fund Medicare, Medicaid, S-chip, but the point is that we are going to take the funds that we get from liquidating the federal government's assets and return them as equitably as we possibly can, in the sense of a bankruptcy agent, to the true creditors, the American people. The national debt as it exists on paper owed to foreign banks, governments, and corporations is not legitimate. And frankly, it's intergenerational child abuse to force your children to pay for things that they never even had a say in. So that is ending with the the executive order that I would sign on my first day in office. Once we've brought all the troops home, liquidated all the foreign properties, then we start the somewhat more complicated process of separating the offensive weaponry from the defensive weaponry. So where that exact line is drawn will have to be determined in the executive order as we determine that in policy. And if I may, just to step back in what this campaign is doing in developing this platform, currently it exists as 5 paragraphs on our website, kokeshforpresident.com. And if you can't remember how to spell my funky last name, you can go to my main website, thefreedomline.com. 3 words, thefreedomline.com. Click over to Kokesh for President, and then click over to the platform, and you can see that 5-paragraph version. The next building out of that platform is going to be a 100-page book, similar to my book, Freedom, which you can get for free at thefreedomline.com in every digital format possible, including audiobook. And that's what we're going to be touring with next year to promote to the American people this idea that we can dissolve the federal government in a peaceful, orderly, responsible manner. The final step in the development of this platform is once we have that book written, grab a team of lawyers and policy experts, lock them in a room for a couple months and say, turn this into a comprehensive, legally binding document that will lay out explicitly all of these various lines so that when people vote, first for me for the nomination of the Libertarian Party in 2020, they will know exactly what they are voting for. And in November 2020, the American people will know that this is a referendum on whether or not the federal government should be allowed to exist at all. You can have a Republican schmuck, a Democrat schmuck, or this exact plan. I will have as little discretion as possible as the bankruptcy agent carrying it out because the executive order will lay out in exact detail how we handle every agency of the federal government. So to the Department of Defense, back to that, the offensive weaponry, nuclear weapons, aircraft carriers, long-range bombers, long-range drones that drop missiles on weddings in the Middle East, those are clearly offensive weapons, nuclear submarines, all of which will be de-weaponized and turned to industrial purposes before being liquidated, if not turned completely into raw material. But they will not be sold as weapons because they are not legitimate products of a free market, of a peaceful people. The remaining equipment of the federal government's military will be apportioned among the states. Small arms, tanks, missile defense, anything that a state could legitimately use in its defense. So every state will have the ability to defend itself far and above what is necessary in the modern world.
Now, there are those who would argue that a nuclear deterrence is necessary in a modern world. What if some of the states decide that they feel they want to have that?
Well, of course, in taking the authority of this position, I would not be in any position to stop a state from creating their own nuclear arsenal. Speaking on my own behalf, I would say they're wrong, and that the only government in the world that has actually used nuclear weapons on people is the United States federal government, and so it's all the more critical that it not be allowed to ever do that again.
Would the fissionable material be available for power plants?
I believe that is what we would be pursuing in terms of de-weaponizing it and making it available for industrial purposes, yes.
Okay. Well, I think that's anything you want to conclude with?
Just to say again that this is the platform that has the potential to turn the Libertarian Party from a debate club into the political force that it needs to be if it wants to win and succeed by uniting Americans against the common enemy of big central government. As Thomas Jefferson said, every generation needs a revolution. This is ours. The time is now, and we can do this.
Thank you.